Welcome to Reputation Room, low energy Robin Brandt today. It's hot. I'm not wearing much from the waist down. Drag myself in front of the camera. Tim, looks nice and air conditioned where you are. I'm so jealous.
The PHA offices are lovely. Yeah, air conditioned and very comfortable. Thank you.
Harry, you well, yeah, full of energy.
I was going to say Philippines, but last night's Scottish result might have slightly dampened my energy.
Okay, we're going to look at politics today, political communication. I think very interestingly as well, strategic communications when it comes to Andy Burnham. We're going to look at the fortunes of two men who have made a lot, actually, haven't they, about being we're normal dads. We love our football. That could be Burnham. That could be Starmer. That could be Burn Starmer. I don't know what you call that. We'll touch on that. And then I also want to talk a little bit about these interviews we're seeing at the World Cup, particularly the ones during the half time. So, firstly, let's do politics or political communications. Harry, Burnham, Starmer, they look very different to you. Are you expecting them to be big, different styles in the way the new prime minister is going to communicate?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, Burnham isn't even prime minister yet, and we saw yesterday a little glimpse into perhaps how he might be communicating. So he got called out in PMQs while Starmer was still there, and Kevin making a little jibe about, you've done all this, you've got rid of Starmer just for a man with good eyebrows and a black t-shirt. And you saw his response to that was to immediately jump onto Twitter and just put up a really simple 7-second video of him sort of looking flirtatiously at the camera and then saying, "It's dark blue, isn't it?" So, I mean, and look, that's a very, you can't imagine Peter Starmer ever doing that. So I think we're going to see a very different form of communications and potentially a bit more social first in the sort of Mandani, Zach Ladsky mold. You see him often replying to things in the comments of Twitter and regularly engaging in rage bait, as the kids say. No, I think we're going to see a very different and much more comfortable communicator.
Well, I mean, the number 10 digital comms operation has really stepped up its game in the last 6 months, so maybe he'll benefit from that as well. Well, I actually think we're going to see big changes, Tim. Andy Burnham is a career politician. Starmer was never a career politician. Andy Burnham likes telling stories. He's done that about buses in Manchester. So I'm actually expecting big changes. Are you?
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think looking back at Keir Starmer, the thing about him, he always felt like he was in a sort of straitjacket when he was communicating. This very strangulated style he had, and I was discussing this with Harry earlier. I remember when he was leader of the opposition, not so well known, and he did Des Tile and Discs, and he told the story of his childhood in a very moving way, actually, particularly around his mother's illness and how his father became totally obsessed about looking after their mother, and the children were almost left to fend for themselves. And he told it in a very authentic and quite moving way. And yet he never ever captured that tone of voice or that narrative when he was prime minister. He just became a bit of a joke with the sort of son of the toolmaker. Yes, he wasn't a comfortable communicator. I think Burnham is much more natural. I think that thing we talk about so often, authenticity, comes very much from being comfortable in your own skin. And that comes partly from being rooted in a sense of place and a sense of community. And Andy Burnham has that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing whether he can deliver because, clearly we're crying out for a different style of leadership. And, whether he can provide it, let's see.
What about, I mean, he is a career politician, Andy Burnham. Let's remember that. He's kind of positioning himself in that slightly Nigel Farage way, a man who tried to become an MP 7 times before he was successful. That, I'm an outsider, but Andy Burnham, I covered both of his failed leadership bids. I mean, this is a man who's been a politician basically since he left Cambridge. But what about the timing, the first few days, in terms of, I think the strategic comms is going to be really important when he comes out in literally those first few days. Is it going to be about the hope and change Obama-esque message we saw at Makerfield, or is it going to be more about settling the markets, but at the same time, here are my big policy aims? Because I think those first few days are going to be absolutely crucial.
Yeah, I think that's right. And this sort of audacity of hope message that Obama perfected, you can have a flavour of that. But I think the most important thing is Keir Starmer's first 100 days were a disaster, and that set the course for his premiership. And I think there are real and very difficult decisions that Andy Burnham has to make. And he will have the most political capital in that honeymoon period. And if he is prepared to explain why he is going to make difficult decisions, perhaps particularly around reform of welfare, that is the only way of funding the defence budget that we need, he needs to tell a story and he needs to explain the need for them. And he could do that early on in his premiership. Whether he will is another matter entirely.
Yeah, what I'm really looking forward to see is the extent to which he wears the office. I think that's something that I find very interesting. You look at someone like Thatcher, right? Very different to Andy Burnham in almost every way imaginable. But you can look at her and tell that she loved the job. She absolutely adored it. And I think the public respond very well to that, to someone that looks comfortable in the office, is relaxed in it, wears it comfortably, doesn't wear heavy on them. Whereas Starmer just always looked like he was sort of panicking, hating it, stressed, worried, this is awful, da, da, da. And I feel the public never respond that well. Burnham's never, he's never held this office. It'll be interesting to see how he responds to it. But I think he's got the potential to be someone who wears it quite naturally, quite comfortably.
Well, look, I mean, if you read, there's a really good piece in the FT magazine this weekend, and it makes quite clear Andy Burnham, very ambitious man. He's talked a lot about, these jobs aren't stepping stones to future office. And I think he's done that on 3 separate occasions. Just very quickly, I want to ask you very quickly, in a kind of slightly pithy way, what about the accent thing? I mean, he's a Scouser, made a lot of being mayor of Manchester, now possibly the leader of our whole country. Keir Starmer had a different type of voice from a different part of the country. I was talking to a friend of mine who works in linguistics in Manchester Uni, and he was saying, I think this is going to be a big thing for Andy Burnham, not just the star, but also what he sounds like, the accent. What do you think, Harry?
Well, as a wearer of an accent myself, I've never found it to do any harm. It sort of gives you a little bit of differentiator and potentially allows you to connect. I mean, I think it could help him. Yeah, the Labour have really struggled traditionally with that red wall, keeping it in post-Brexit years, ever since Boris smashed through it. And yeah, I mean, it could just be as simple as having a man that they feel looks like them, speaks like them, in the office is more easy to connect to.
Tim, the accent, good
Well, I
thing,
think,
bad thing?
yeah, I mean, he's the sort of self-proclaimed king of the North. Manchesterism is supposedly at the heart of his political philosophy. And I suppose in order to deliver that with credibility, you need to have an accent that's rooted in that community. The only thing that occurs to me is this could actually be quite divisive if, as we're led to believe that a lot of his policies are really trying to hit the London and the South, particularly in terms of, for example, how we're taxed on property, land tax, whatever it might be. It could become quite a dividing line, and it could end up really sort of fueling antagonisms.
Yeah, you make such a fuss of it, it excludes everybody else. Right, let's move on to the World Cup. We're seeing these interviews at half time that are our innovation, aren't they? England's assistant coach came on and spoke in diplomatic terms about the hairdryer treatment that Tuchel was going to give them in that first game. Do you think they're working well? Or I mean, they don't last very long. They're whipped off, aren't they? But do you think they're a good insight, Tim, to the halftime machination?
I don't like the format at all. I find it intrusive. But what I would say is Anthony Barry, Thomas Tuchel's assistant, the interview he gave half-time during the Croatia game, when, as you say, he gave it absolutely straight, didn't pull his punches, said England were playing with fear, was very effective. And what's interesting about Anthony Barry is when he started his coaching career and looked around the room and saw players who'd achieved far more than he had in the game, he thought, what can I have that they haven't got? And he thought, I need to be a good communicator. And he went away and at his own expense, he hired someone to coach him for months and months, took advantage of all the media training that was on offer. And he really has made communication the most important thing about his coaching strategy. And I think that's such an important lesson, not just for football, for sport, but in all areas of life. And that preparation, if you really spend the time working on that side of things, gives you so much confidence. And not just in terms of that short form media interview, which is very superficial but important. You manage to land your messages succinctly, but also more broadly than that in terms of how you really sort of lead a room and own a room in all sorts of contexts, maybe in business and in your wider life.
What about that classic thing, Harry? I mean, Tim and I have done some work with some Premiership players, and often I used to get this when I was at the BBC. Bosses would say, "Bring a bit more of yourself to it, Robin. Bring a bit more of your personality." And we've talked about this, haven't we? Bring a bit more of yourself, Harry. But that's difficult, isn't it? When the light goes on and you're under those conditions, bringing a bit more of yourself's not a done thing, is it, Harry?
Well, if being yourself is being a miserable dour Scotsman, then it's not so difficult for Steve Clarke, who manages it fantastically. Yeah, look, these are not easy. They're high emotional moments, particularly these post-match interviews. The stakes are so big. You've got the weight of a country on your shoulders. And when things don't go your way, it takes real skill to be able to compose yourself, go out there in front of the camera, as you say, lights on, hard questioning, and be able to, yeah, bring a bit of your personality, show a bit of leadership, authenticity, something that's going to bring the fans back on side. And if you want a case study in how not to do that, look at Rude Steve Clark, 2 interviews in 6 days, both of which he stormed off after 30 seconds. Both being rude to journalists, but also rude to all the traveling fans that have spent tens of thousands of pounds to get up there.
Yeah, here's a bit of free advice for potential clients. Hey, Tim, storming off is never a good thing, is it?
Never a good look.
That's the sort of absolute rule number one. But also, I think, to Harry's point, the most important thing to remember is when you're representing your country as a player or as a coach, is not just those who've come out to support you and as Harry said, spent tens of thousands of pounds doing so, but those watching at home. You need to find a way of harnessing that passion, and that is, I think, sometimes the problem that we see with footballers and with coaches sometimes, when they don't manage to convey what a great privilege it is to be in their position, playing for their country, leading their country. And I think that's something that also shouldn't be underestimated.
All right, guys. I mean, my kind of back of envelope advice to anyone with these sport interviews is, be insightful, have something interesting to say, keep it brief, certainly keep it concise, and bring a bit of yourself. That's really important. You don't want to sound like everybody else. All right. Good stuff today. I should just say, actually, with these reputation rooms, as we get going with the three of us here, we're quite keen on feedback. So anybody watching this or anybody sharing it, let us know what you think. We want to hear what you think, and we're keen to get a bit of feedback on how insightful or otherwise you think this is. Today it was World Cup interviews, a bit of Burnham v Starmer. We cover a whole range of diverse things as well, whatever's been around in the week leading up to these moments. So let us know what you think.